All right, Maddie, here we're going to use the quadratic equation. We're going to simplify this out. Let me click off that for you. And a lot of information here, but don't get overwhelmed, really. This is -6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5, so we can just evaluate that. And then we're going to divide that whole thing by 2 times 3. So we're going to get two values here for x, basically, because we're going to have a positive value and a negative value. And that's pretty much it. So let's start doing some order of operations here. We're going to evaluate, let me write this down. Come on, pen. Pen, there we go. So we're going to have -6 plus or minus the square root of, now 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 3 is 12, 12 times 5 is 60, right there. And that's going to be over 6, because 2 times 3 is 6. Let's take that a step further now. Come on, pen. Never work. This pen never works. Awful. Okay. Next step, we're going to have -6 plus or minus the square root. Now 36 minus 60. I'm going to subtract that out. We can do, you can use a calculator if you want. I'm just doing it out here. So we're going to have -24 underneath the radical symbol, and that's over 6. Now remember, we can't take the square root of a radical and really deal with any of that stuff. So what we have to do is we have to think about this instead as I root 24. So that's going to be our next step. Let's go back to black. -6 plus or minus I root 24 over 6. Excuse me. Okay, so remember, when you write I, we can make the radicand, the number underneath the radical symbol, a positive, and we can continue to work this out. Now 24, can we break that down? Is there a perfect square that I can pull out of 24? Perfect squares being 1, 4, 9, 16, and so on. So 6 times 4 will give me 24, where 4 is the biggest perfect square. So my next step is going to be I root 4 times 6 over 6. Now, remember that when I split these up, this is called the product rule, by the way, I can take the square root of the perfect square, and it just allows me to simplify this a little bit more. So we're going to have 6 plus or minus, now the square root of 4 is 2, so that's going to be 2I root 6 over 6. All right, we're getting there now. So at this point now, we're basically done, buddy. Remember, we have two numbers here, and we have a binomial. We have two terms up top with a common denominator. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this separately. So we basically have two numbers. We have -6, okay? -6 over 6 plus or minus 2I over 6 root 6. Right? So I'm just applying that common denominator to both terms here. It helps make it a little bit easier to simplify. So -6 divided by 6 is going to be -1 plus or minus. And here, this little fraction, this 2 over 6, let's just reduce that as well. That's going to be I. Come on, pen. Get something better here for us. That's going to be I over 3 times root 6. Now that whole thing is really over that. You could put 1I if you want, but that's kind of basic as well. So that's pretty much it. We're pretty much done now. When you're putting this in my math lab, by the way, we just restate the most negative first. So that's going to be -1 minus, I root 6 over 3, comma, and we're going to have -1 plus I root 6 over 3. Okay? So a lot going on there, buddy, but a lot of it was covered in Math 10.4.6 too, so I hope that is somewhat a bit familiar. If you have any questions about that, or you want to chat more about these negative radicals and all that cool stuff, feel free to let me know. Other than that, just take it step by step, and don't get overwhelmed with all the information. Just follow the order of operations. Don't panic. Start with your exponents first, then do all the multiplying, and just keep going from there. And hopefully it'll come out for you. Thanks.